Okay, so we're continuing the 3.10 read aloud, picking up where we left off on page 249. The American System. Henry Clay proposed a government-sponsored program of internal improvements that he called the American System. Clay's system consisted of three major components: a protective tariff, improvements to the national banking system, and more efficient national transportation. Clay warned that American industry was doomed without federal help, so he lobbied for a protective tariff. By taxing British imports and thus raising their sale price, the tariff helped American manufacturers by making their products relatively cheaper to buy. To sustain growth, Clay and other nationalist leaders moved to improve America's banking system. In this project, they were building on what James Madison had started. The Second Bank of the United States helped regulate the expanding economy by providing credit to businesses, as well as state-chartered banks. In return for providing state banks with loans, the Second Bank of the United States was entitled to keep an eye on its client banks to make sure they were properly handling their affairs. Extending an initiative raised by James Madison, Clay argued that for reasons of growth and security, it was important to keep transportation costs low. Smoother, more level roads meant faster, safer, cheaper trips to the market. The national road was built with federal funds, helped many Western farmers affordably get their products to Eastern markets. Local governments also used tax money to build canals and improve rivers for smoother travel over water. Clay's followers also understood that a better transportation system would improve communications by speeding the flow of news and information between different regions of the country. They hoped that improved communications would help unify an increasingly large and diverse country. Others agreed with Clay that this was no time for a hands-off, laissez-faire government. And look here at the side. Laissez-faire is a French term meaning let it be, describes a government that intervenes minimally in economic affairs. Young John C. Calhoun, a Southern Carolinian who served as Secretary of War under Monroe, saw a federally funded program of road and canal construction as a means to ensure the strength and political prosperity of the Republic. Born in the South Carolina backwoods, Calhoun shared with Clay not only a rural upbringing, but also a firm belief that the Republic would flourish only when its various parts were connected. Frontier settlers needed to get their crops to southern and eastern markets, and eastern manufacturers needed to move their goods west. Calhoun, who stood more than 6 feet tall and sported a vertical shock of black hair, commanded the attention of those around him. Unlike the more emotional Clay, Calhoun cultivated a courteous, gentlemanly air. Still, he possessed an inflexible determination. One observed him called him the cast iron man. Another forceful political presence was Daniel Webster, whose career in Congress included a long term as a senator from Massachusetts. In his view, national improvements would not only link East and West, but also help unify the free North and the slave South. As Webster later explained, improvements in one region would benefit the entire nation, for we do not impose geographical limits to our patriotic feelings. Like Clay and Calhoun, Webster was a powerful orator. Said one admirer, with a sort of supernatural power, he possesses his hearers and controls their opinions. Federal power and sectional tensions. Like many of their followers, Webster, Calhoun, and Clay came of age during the War of 1812. They knew the dangers of a weak central state and shared Madison's vision for a more integrated and powerful nation. They saw government initiatives such as internal improvements, the banks, and assistance to Western farmers as patriotic undertakings. In a speech in which he defended his American system, Clay said that this transformation of the condition of the country from gloom and distress to brightness and prosperity has been mainly the work of American legislation, fostering American industry, instead of allowing it to be controlled by foreign legislation, cherishing foreign industry. With nationalist fervor, he went on to claim, all branches of industry are animated and flourishing. Commerce, foreign and domestic, active, cities and towns springing up, enlarging and beautifying, navigation fully and profitably employed, and the whole face of the country smiling with improvement, cheerfulness, and abundance. Clay strongly believed that it was both the duty and responsibility of Congress to take an active role in shaping the young nation's economy, but not everyone approved of an expanded federal role. Although Madison and Monroe promoted many policies that the national government's authority might be extended, many were concerned that the national government's authority might be extended too far. Madison had vetoed a massive internal improvement bill just before he left office in 1817, and Monroe was reluctant to support federal funding of improvements not directly related to national defense. The powers of the federal government were also challenged during the crisis that led to the Missouri Compromise. Some white Southerners questioned the right of the federal government to intervene in what they perceived as a regional matter. They feared that the federal government, under the influence of wealthy Northern interests, might try to do away with slavery. The protective tariff that Clay and his supporters championed was met with resistance from many Southern planters. They believed that such protection helped Northern manufacturers at the expense of Southern planters. While Northern industry grew, Southern farmers would have to pay the price of higher imports. Many in the South suspected that Northerners who opposed slavery were trying to use the federal government to further their own interests at the expense of other regions. More and more Southerners came to believe that an active federal government could only be used as a tool for Northern industrial and political power. Like the growing sectional tensions, disagreements over the proper scope of federal power revealed limits to the spirit of democratic nationalism. The Panic of 1819. In 1819, the United States economy went from boom to bust, from thriving profit to dismal depression. How did this happen? Following the War of 1812, Americans had discovered they could borrow some money, buy some land, and raise crops that could be shipped to Europe at great profit. Local banks printed money as fast as possible to lend to cash-strapped farmers. The Second Bank of the United States fueled the frenzy by loaning more money to local banks. All of this was fine for a while, but it ignored a simple economic reality. Currency could be exchanged directly for gold and silver, called specie. At least in theory, people could trade their paper money for specie from bank vaults at any time. By 1819, the amount of paper money in circulation far exceeded the amount of specie in the vaults. Problems started with a sharp decrease in European demand for American crops. With the end of the Napoleonic Wars in Europe, many soldiers left the battlefield and returned to farming. By 1818, European agriculture recovered, and the prices of American crops plunged, and farmers found it hard to pay back loans. As farmers went broke, banks suffered. Panicked people rushed to their banks to get specie in exchange for their paper notes. The economy plunged into a crisis. To save itself, the Second Bank of the United States demanded that local banks repay their loans in specie. Countless local banks had to shut their doors, and many Americans lost everything. Said one critic, "The Second Bank was saved and the people were ruined." The Panic of 1819 was the first major downturn in what would prove to be an ongoing economic cycle of boom and bust in American history. Because Americans had never before experienced such a widespread economic collapse, people blamed the Second Bank, and some even blamed the use of paper money itself. They overlook a critical cause, the overextension of borrowing and investment that had drawn so many people into the crisis. Okay, so we'll stop here for this lesson and go back. You have to complete the cash, characters, and compromise activity. Make sure you have your reading guide completed and check your answers with the lesson answer key. Okay, let's look at the cash, characters, and compromise. Okay, read the following statements and decide which are true. Use your book as needed. When you are finished, you will have 3 true statements about the economy after the War of 1812, 3 about some important people during the period, and 3 about a compromise that took place at the end of the decade. Which of the following statements about the economy after the War of 1812 was true? So you just go through these questions and click whatever one you think it is or how many you think there are and go through the activity. And complete that to the end. And then make sure that you get your keyword that you need at the end of the activity to put into the 3.10 checkpoint. Good luck!